Progressive criminal justice reform isn't just not working in Canada, it's getting people killed, and politicians still pushing it, like Premier David Eby in BC and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, need to be held accountable and definitely not re-elected. I want to go over a recent situation that happened in Surrey, British Columbia, and show that this isn't just an issue of a few people slipping through the cracks, this is a systemic problem. So, 3 weeks ago, Adam Mann, a lifelong criminal and scumbag, was arrested for aggravated assault in Surrey, despite the fact that he had a lengthy criminal record with many violent offenses in it, and he doesn't even live in BC, making it a very high probability he's not going to show up to court and he might commit another crime. He was still let out of jail. He then went on to murder a woman, Tori Dunn, in her Surrey home during a botched home invasion, the exact sort of thing that Adam Mann was previously arrested for, going around and assaulting people, breaking into homes, trying to steal valuables. Now, I get frustrated when I see politicians like NDP BC Premier David Eby acting shocked at the consequences of his own soft on crime policies. This is a situation where very much the blame is shared between Eby as well as Trudeau. Yes, most of the current bad laws are coming from the federal level, but they're being bolstered by David Eby's lack of support for the police and his championing of decriminalization efforts in many different areas. A lot of easy bail laws that he's passed that he's also been supporting. He could pass provincial measures to prevent people from getting out of prison so easily, but David Eby is a man who supports the criminal over innocent members of the public. He even wrote this book back before he was an NDP politician titled How to Sue the Police and Private Security in Small Claims Court, a book all about small technicalities you can use to extract money out of the police force, even though they might have done absolutely nothing wrong. The man fundamentally hates criminal justice and the police. And so I don't care that David Eby is shocked in the aftermath of the situation and is figuring out what ways we can improve the current system, because he doesn't want to do a deep, tough on crime reform, which means he doesn't actually care. This recent Canada Press headline, I think, highlights just how sort of gormless Eby is acting. It says, BC Premier wants to better understand bail reform failing in women's murder. David Eby is confused because before a couple years ago, we basically had complete blanket automatic bail. And in the last year or so, we've passed a couple reforms on the federal level that he's consulted on, and as well as some other provincial measures that was supposed to make it so that violent criminals were not automatically released. The problem is that David Eby doesn't fundamentally disagree with the way that the current system works. So automatic default bail is still the law of the land in Canada. What David Eby and the federal Liberal government, under Justin Trudeau's control, of course, what they did was they just gave prosecutors and judges a couple more tools to be able to hold violent criminals in prison. What this is basically doing is gamifying whether or not people who could potentially go out and murder people are kept in prison. Overworked prosecutors who are not paid that much and do not have a lot of resources are supposed to bend over backwards and jump through 17 hoops to keep every single Adam Mann in prison. And that David Eby is just expecting them to jump through every hoop, do hours of paperwork in order to go in front of a judge and make the case for keeping people in prison. Many of these judges are soft on crime judges, so they're not even probably going to grant many of the bail denials for violent criminals like Adam Mann. And so what we have now is a system where basically prosecutors have to overwork themselves to make sure every single chance of a violent criminal getting out is prevented. This is not a good system. And on top of that, David Eby also denied the Surrey Police Department from getting more money from him from when they transitioned from just being a branch of the RCMP to being local police. This headline reads, BC not offering Surrey any more money for police transition. He gave them a one-time payment of $150 million to upgrade their resources from going from just the provincial federal police force to a local police force that will have enough officers and resources to meet the needs of the quickly growing city of Surrey. So that's another problem. They do not have the police resources available in places like Surrey to police the streets. So this is a shared tragedy between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and BC Premier David Eby. If they stopped supporting these progressive policies, they started appointing tougher on crime judges, and they stopped doing stupid things like decriminalization that are stealing away police resources to enforcing laws around like high drug traffic areas of provinces, we could actually prevent tragedies like this from occurring. But David Eby doesn't really want to. So when you actually read his comments, and I did in full on the situation involving Tory Dunn's murder, it's all about how we need to talk to the family involved, and we need to maybe add a few extra little layers of bureaucracy to make sure that maybe Adam Mans don't slip through the cracks as much. But the problem is that the default of the system is to let people like Adam Mann out. The system only holds people who are like drug kingpins and actual murderers. So if you haven't murdered anyone yet, David Eby will mostly give you the benefit of the doubt, even if all the facts line up to say, do not let this man out. There was even people writing up reports saying that Adam Mann should not be released. This was presented in front of judges during arraignments and whatnot, and it still never actually resulted in him being held in prison because David Eby is anti-incarceration, because for some reason incarcerating violent criminals is bad. David Eby inherently respects the rights and well-being of criminals more than he does innocent members of the public, so I do not value his shock. I do not value his concern over this issue because he's not going to do anything about it. So, if you live in British Columbia, I urge you to vote for the British Columbia Conservative Party. The BC NDP need to be absolutely walked out of office. They need to be frog marched out of office so that you can have a government who can pass provincial policies to make it easier to hold criminals, local bylaws in your municipal governments, push on all your councillors to push local bylaws to hold repeat offenders, whether it's violent crimes or it's non-violent crimes. There's really, in my mind, no such thing as a victimless crime, the way that many progressives like to argue. Just because someone wasn't violently assaulted during a crime doesn't mean it's not serious. Everybody should be held in prison if you are a repeat offender, no matter if it's petty theft or if it's a violent offense. So make sure you go out, get out there, vote for the BC Conservatives, donate to them, volunteer, and make sure pro-crime politicians like David Eby are not allowed to stay in government. These people are an absolute blight on our political system, and they do not care if more situations like what happened to Tory Dunn continue happening. The crime is sort of the purpose of what they're doing, because they think criminals are all Aladdins who are only committing crimes because they've been hard done by the system and they need to steal and rob and mug people in order to just get by in life. Because, we need more social justice and we need more financial justice policies to stop stuff like this from happening.